Hello, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Michelle Mays, and I am the co founder of Champions for Philanthropy. We help professional athletes and other influencers build, launch, manage, and promote their charitable interests. So that includes everything from helping them start a nonprofit to manage an existing foundation, as well as helping them to create various charitable projects and initiatives and connecting clients with current nonprofits. I'm excited to be joined by four incredible individuals for a discussion about partnering with athletes. On the panel today, we have Christy Keswick, Darrin Gray, Ellis Wyms, and Whitney Holtzman. These speakers partner with athletes in a variety of ways, and we're going to get started by letting them each introduce themselves and give a brief overview about how their respective organizations works with athletes. And Christy, we'll get started with you.
Sure. Good Sports is a nonprofit that really is focused on making sure all kids have the opportunity to get involved in sports and fitness activities. And we focus on equipment being one of the major components of that. So we work with sporting goods manufacturers to align some of their excess goods with need in the community. And because we do so much in sports and through pretty much we support about 20 different sports a year. We have an opportunity throughout the year to usually work with multiple athletes, and have been doing that for quite a while, and use that to drive awareness for the organization.
Wonderful. Now, Whitney?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Whitney Holtzman, and I'm CEO of Victories. And we help pro athletes and sports leagues build their brands. So I essentially become the chief marketing officer for the different athletes that I work with, and we help them maximize their time in the spotlight and figure out life after sports. So 100% of the NFL clients I work with actually have second careers off the field while they're playing. And then I'm the author of You Are the First You, which came out at the end of March and just tells the story of my career journey and all the lessons that I wish someone had taught me along the way.
Awesome. Darrin?
Yeah, gang, my name's Darrin Gray, and I am a sports ministry guy that really specializes in ministering to the pros so that the pros can minister to people. So we find really great ways to connect their hearts and find ways to get programming going to bring together purpose-aligned partners, media donors, investors, and athletes to help make a difference in the world. So I've been at this for about 25 years. I go by the handle at All Pro Dad Leader because a lot of my work was forged in and around Tony Dungy's fatherhood program. In fact, that's how I met Ellis Wyms, who will be on next, because he volunteered at a big program that we did at Raymond James Stadium. So a lot of the frameworks and forums that we help to curate are around fatherhood and meaningful family interactions with pros, because when you meet them where they are, and it gives them something they can naturally talk about in the community. So that's a snapshot of what I do. And thanks for having me here today, Michelle.
Wonderful. Happy to have you all here. And Ellis?
Hey everybody, my name is Ellis Wyms. I'm a former NFL player and founder of Athletes for Computer Science, and we provide computer science fundamentals education for kids in elementary and middle school. And our goal is to get those kids exposed to skills and opportunities that can hopefully drive their interest in their education and drive their interest in eventually into a career or being an entrepreneur. And we leverage the influence that our athletes have. Our athletes have an incredible influence with our kids. So we want to use that influence to drive kids, to drive engagement into educational opportunities that can actually pan out into a great career, and give them the confidence that they can find a space in this world, in this economy, where they have value and where they belong. Yeah, that's kind of what we do.
Wonderful. So, as you all know, last year's Sport Philanthropy Summit was an in person event, but obviously, due to the current situation, we are doing this virtually. So, if you each could talk a little bit about how your work has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and what you've done to adjust during this time. And Ellis, this time we'll start with you.
Yeah. COVID-19 was definitely difficult for our organization. Again, we we were leveraging before, everybody was kind of doing Zoom and doing Google Meets. We were leveraging those platforms to take classes in the places that wouldn't traditionally have access to those learning opportunities. So a lot of times, I grew up in rural Mississippi, and so those places a lot of times are off the grid from certain learning opportunities that those of us who live in more populated areas that live in the cities, you'll have access to at colleges, at different small businesses that offer those opportunities. So when COVID kind of hit and the kids weren't in person at school, which we were doing video conferencing in front of the classes for the entire class, one, we had to kind of rethink kind of how we teach our curriculum. Because doing it, with all the kids in the classroom is much different than doing it with all the kids kind of being at home on a Zoom conference. And we're talking about kids that are, third to seventh grade. The attention span is already kind of tricky. So that was tough, and so we had to kind of adjust the way we delivered classes. Of course, with the financial restraints on a lot of different companies that were supporting us, or they're enabling us to be able to employ our staff. Those things kind of took a back seat, and with schools having to figure out how to teach the main subjects that they have to teach in order to keep their funding and make sure their schools are successful, then programs like computer science fundamentals kind of take a back seat. So you kind of wait and see, okay, well, let us figure this out first, and then we can look at how we can implement that program into the basis of what we're doing. So it kind of changed the way we were doing, but I kind of look at things to where it kind of forces you to evolve and learn new skills and learn to do things differently. And even after the pandemic, I think we'll have a better idea of how we can deliver classes in a different way if the circumstances in which we usually deliver classes changes, or if that's not the ideal situation for our students. So it's been some tough times, but I think we'll be better on the other side of it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is definitely not anything we were expecting to encounter at the beginning of 2020. But like you said, Ellis, there are definitely some positive things that have come out of the different adjustments that we've all had to make. So, what about the others? You all can jump in and share how your work has been impacted.
I would just say that for me, it was twofold. I personally was launching a book at the right when the pandemic hit. So I had all these in-person events. One of my NFL players was going to be interviewing me in a fireside chat. And so initially it was a disappointment when that all got canceled, but you find the silver lining. So for me, I said, well, at least people are at home and hopefully now they have some time to read a book that they may not have had otherwise. And I think it's sort of been a progression. I mean, for me, things really hit when the first NBA game got canceled. I think it was March 11th, and that was a shock to the system. But you really, at the time, thought it was going to be a couple weeks, and so it was a scare when it happened because sports was being canceled. But genuinely, we were scared that it was only going to be a few weeks, and the fact that it lasted as long as it did, I don't think anyone could have expected it. So it ended up being more of a marathon. And I think for the athletes I work with, there's not a one size fits all. There are different personalities and in different circumstances. So for some of them, they appreciated being home and having time to spend with their families and their kids that they wouldn't have had otherwise. But there were others who, some aren't married and they're used to being busy and traveling. And for them, it was almost like counseling. I had to work with them on patience and, giving suggestions of things that they could do outside. I mean, it really was it wasn't only me trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do for my business? But I had to help each one of them individually. And so I think, we'll all be better for it. And I think it definitely reaffirmed my mission that sports isn't forever. I think people who play in the pros understand that, but this was the first time really in the middle of the year that sports were completely wiped off the face of the planet. So I was grateful that I had done the work with my athletes ahead of time because it was sort of the great equalizer. So one of my clients, who may not be necessarily the biggest name on the field, he plays for the Patriots, but he only lives on 15% of his salary. And we had built his brand about a year prior to the pandemic. So when it hit and there were no sports or stats or great plays to talk about, he was the one all over the news because he had all these financial literacy tips. So I think in some ways it really paid off for the guys that I work with, because they had a whole nother platform to talk about, and the people who just focused on sports didn't really have that plan B to turn to.
Great.
I'm happy to jump in. Oh, sorry. Um, I think for us, we serve, not only professional sports were sidelined, but youth sports were sidelined as well. And that's really, where we focus. And it's also, for a lot of the kids that we serve, a very positive part of their day. And so pulling them away from that and away from their schools and their friends had a major impact on a lot of the kids that we serve. And so we knew that when we had the opportunity to open our doors back up and start shipping equipment to these kids, that we had to be ready to do it, even if it meant doing it differently. And so for us, it was about meeting kids where they're at. So instead of us making donations to, organized teams, which is often what we do, we had to start to figure out, how do we get sports equipment and balls and things like that to kids at home? And so it was a completely different shift in our model, but we felt it was critically important to be able to serve them where they were. And sometimes that meant, partnering with food banks to get equipment home with meals. And so it was definitely a major shift in our strategy, which we're continuing to do to this day. But it allowed us to actually meet the kids where they're at. And then as things started to open back up, we were able to do things like provide additional equipment to programs that could now do physically distant play. So we still weren't back to games and scrimmages, but we could practice. But everybody needed their own equipment to do that, to limit sharing. So we adjusted our model to be able to react to the point in the pandemic that we were, as it related to youth sports. And that kept us in great communication with our program. So by the time things started to really open up in the summer, we had a much better idea as to where everyone was at. And that varied by state, and that even varied by town. So it was, our team was working hard to understand those things. And then I'd say financially, the way that it really impacted our business was that we had to cancel all in-person events. So, any fun kind of fundraising gala, anything that would gather a lot of people, all those were off the table, continue to be off the table. All of our volunteer events were off the table. And so our business development and fundraising teams really had to think differently about what could we capture in this type of environment. And we had a lot of success with that, but it really made us rethink, things can't be the same. And so if you're not flexible in this environment, if you're not willing to pivot and adjust your strategies, then you're really going to struggle, because this is going to be, we used to say we're going to back into the vaccine and that will be our back to normal date. Well, I think we all know that that's not going to be our back to normal date now. And so now we're really looking at, this is a long-term strategy for most businesses moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for me, it's about bringing hope. And in the midst of this time, I'll just give an example. There's a lot of people that are hurting, that may not, have be as fortunate as we are. And what we do really matters because it brings hope, right? Sports, the nature of sports, literally the derivative of the word sports means to strive together. And while we can't be physically together, we still bring hope through this notion of sports. And so we had countless projects, hundreds of projects canceled, but one of the most notable was our ultimate training camp. And so we had to pivot from what would have been 40 college athletes in a particular place at a particular time. And we opened it up and we had 800 people come and participate virtually. And then we created breakout rooms and we learned how to use Zoom and the technology in new ways, the same ways that NFL teams began using Zoom to figure out how can we go deeper? How can we do more? How can we create intimacy even though it's hard? And then as soon as the justice piece started, I went on a listening tour and I started reading books like this. And I started reading in on Black history to try to understand, what is it that I need to understand as a white man that grew up differently? And I'll give one anecdote just because I think it's interesting and it will inform what sports is. I began calling each day a different black man that played NFL football, and I would say, through after building rapport, asking questions and going, "What was it like growing up, Ellis?" And if we had the time, I would do that exact question today. And they go, "What do you mean?" I said, 8, 9, 10. What was it like growing up? And I had one particular man look me in the eyes and he said, "Darrin, have you ever walked into a grocery store, a convenience store, a department store, and ever had to wonder if anyone was watching you because I thought they were going to take something that wasn't yours?" And I hadn't. And from that was sparked a deeply meaningful discussion, just saying, that informed the way that I've been doing my communications, my missional work, and a lot of these kind of programs to make sure that we're conscious of those that are different and see how we can be stronger and better together. So that's what the pandemic has been teaching us. And it's our job to take the pain out of the pandemic, right? And to find ways to bring a positive word. So that's my quick pivot story. We've all got ours, but it's an important topic, and I thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So before we go on, I do just want to encourage our viewers to, if you have any questions for the panelists, please feel free to drop them into the chat, and we will get to those along the way, and hopefully we'll have a bit of time at the end as well. So moving on, I want to know if you all could just talk about, I know several of you are the founders of your organization, so can you talk about what was the impetus behind starting your work and how your past experiences helped prepare you for the current work that you're doing now in terms of partnering with athletes?
Well, I guess I can go first. One, I started to have my own kids that I was raising, and you're thinking about, okay, what's best for them in their education to give them a good foundation so they can find success, when they grow up and they become adults. And two, I grew up in the Mississippi Delta, and it's been traditionally one of the poorest areas of the country. And when I grew up, we had factories and we had opportunities for parents to be able to work and provide for their families. But just like in many towns and cities around the country, a lot of factories have moved. The traditional way that people have worked and earned a living has changed, and there is an educational divide. Not just at the high school level, but at a foundational level. There's a chasm of really giving kids things and opportunities to inspire them to believe that they can grow up and be successful, and that they can achieve anything that they want, and that they belong. And they need to be able to build that confidence, not just in making great grades at the curriculum that they have in front of them, but building confidence that they can learn things that can lead to real world opportunity. So that led me to wanting to start, this organization. And I've always been interested in technology. I majored in technology teacher education in college because I wanted to teach tech classes, and I was going to be a football coach. So post NFL, I find myself where I'm kind of a teacher. I've taught a lot of the classes. I've trained other people on how to teach the classes because it's something that I'm interested in. And I know I can have an impact. I can have an influence as a former athlete, Super Bowl champion. I know I have an influence, so I wanted to take that influence and use it in a very specific way, specific to a specific problem, a specific void that we have throughout our nation and our educational system. So that just led me to kind of start my own organization. And the great thing about the times we live in today is that if you want to start something, and if you want to do something, if you want to make an impact, the tools exist for you to do so. And so it's just being interested enough to take those tools, go figure out what they are, go learn about what they are, and then putting them into action in the areas that you want to impact. So it's never been a better time for people, not just athletes, but for people to be able to impact the world in the way that they want to impact it. And having the interest in technology and education, knowing the void that exists in our educational system, and having the tools to be able to go out and actually do it, uh, it was awesome. And it made it not easy, because it's never easy building anything, but it made a way for me to go out and make that impact. And I had the confidence that I could do it.
That's great.
I think for me, people tell these stories of starting a business and they wake up one day and have this vision and it's rainbows and butterflies and sort of like a magical experience like you're in a movie. That was not the case for me. I think I was just at a point where I had worked at a lot of companies and I really loved the work I was doing. I was having success. I followed the journey that was right for me, but frankly, I had a lot of bosses or direct managers that weren't great at managing people. They were micromanagers. I felt my soul dying. And I kind of had to say, okay, I've worked at all of these jobs. These are the things that I really like. And at the end of the day, at each chapter, what does my heart want the most? And I realized, at this point in my life, I really wanted to be my own boss and make my own schedule and be able to live here in Tampa. And, as I wrote out the list of what mattered the most to me and put all those factors together, the main option was sort of starting my own business. But I kind of looked back and thought, why was this something I was never taught in school, that this was an option? I may have gotten to this sooner if someone had presented it as a career choice. I always thought you had to go work somewhere else. And I kind of got here in a roundabout way. And I thought, okay, I've had success. I've liked the work I've been doing, but I consistently have this problem where I don't love the people I'm reporting to. I didn't necessarily think they were always the best leaders, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to give it a shot and see what it's like trying to do this on my own. And if it doesn't work, I can always go back. And so I gave it a shot, and kind of from the next day on, I was started to be busy. I think that in the beginning of starting my company, I thought I was going to be doing just social media and endorsement deals for athletes. That had been my past experience in working with them. And then as I started to get to know them, I became really alarmed because they became like family to me. And I said, well, what do you mean that no one's helping you figure out what you're doing after football is done? And what do you mean you moved to a new city and no one is helping you get adjusted? I mean, just this past weekend, one of my clients was traded from the Jets to the Bucks, and I texted him and I said, "Do you have a place to live?" And he said, "No, actually, I really need help with that." So I spent the weekend, working with a realtor, and he was able to move into his place today. So I think I just saw that there was this white space of the things that I would do for my family and loved ones that no one else was jumping in to help with, and it sort of became my purpose. And I was saying earlier that I had one particular client who was so excited about the post football career that we had built that he chose to retire early. So for me, that's a success story.
Wonderful. And Christy, anything you'd like to add?
Sure. So I agree with Whitney. It's not as easy as like waking up one day and it's all created. I won't go into the gory details of all that, but really the impetus behind starting Good Sports was that we saw a gap really starting to form between what I'll say is the haves and have-nots in youth sports. And we started to really see, sort of the more affluent communities getting probably overdosed, frankly, on sports in terms of club sports and in specializing early in all of this. And then on the flip side, we saw schools in some of the inner cities that we work with that were just dropping sports because kids couldn't afford participation fees, and we're left with not a lot. And so we saw this starting to develop more than 15 years ago, when we started the organization, but it wasn't really being it really talked about. It certainly is much more talked about today. But what we looked at was we identified that one of the major issues is really the economics of it. It's the cost of playing. And one of the biggest costs of playing is sports equipment. And so when we founded Good Sports, it was founded in the Boston area. Well, we're now a national organization. It was founded in the Boston area with a lot of sports manufacturers in our backyard. And so the idea was to try to work with them to pilot a partnership that would allow us to take their excess inventory and to reassign it to kids who need it. And that I mean, to this day, that is our business model. It's obviously we've got our reach has gotten much further, and as well as our partners. But the idea was, let's try to stop that gap from widening further and see if we can even close it. And that is what we do as an organization. We've served over 6 million kids. We've donated over $65 million worth of sports equipment across the country. And because we've been able to have that kind of impact, um, we we've built this credibility as an organization. We are a 4-star charity navigator for 8 years, so we have this level of credibility. And the idea around bringing athletes into it is that not every athlete has a foundation or even wants a foundation, but what they do want, which I'm sure Whitney can attest to, is to partner with an organization that is going to only benefit their reputation, and vice versa. And so being able to bring good sports and work with to athletes to be able to partner with is really a mutually beneficial agreement. And so we've been doing that for years. And really the idea there is not a one stop, sort of one size fits all, but rather what is the athlete trying to get out of it? What does good sports need to get out of it? And how can we work together to either raise funds for the organization, raise awareness of the organization, be able to get out into the community to meet some of the kids. So it really depends on, what they're trying to get out of it, and we can match that with what our needs are. But we really feel like as a nonprofit with a limited marketing budget, it's really a great opportunity for us to raise awareness for the organization.
Wonderful. So I know with Champions for Philanthropy, when I tell people what I do and they found out I work with athletes, they think it's all, this glamorous job. But as with any position, it's not all glitz and glamour all the time. So can you all talk about some of the challenges that come along with reaching out to and working with athletes?
So I think we missed Darren on the last question.
Well, thank you. I do own my own corporation, and I opened it in '04 to help to do sort of sports philanthropy, media, marketing, communication, coming out of the media business. But that's much less interesting than talking about the heart set and mindset of athletes, right? Because I think that's what you're asking in a way, Michelle. It's like, how do we make sure to meet them where they are? Because it can be hard sometimes. And being a pro is not easy. And it takes dedication and commitment and a focus beyond that of a lot of careers. Like, you don't leave it at the facility when you leave, because it becomes especially when you're active, becomes all consuming. And I think the leagues are doing a better and better job of finding ways to do player engagement and find a way to help them, guide them to do less of what happened Whitney was talking about earlier, where, hey, they may not know after they're playing what they should do. But I spend a lot of time getting to know people at a heart level. I know their kids' names to try to understand where they're coming from. And from that, it makes them far more likely to be willing to spend time like Ellis has done today, to say, hey, I'd be happy to share a little bit of time. And then it's mutually beneficial. So I think that together, it's a lot of listening. And it's a lot of just being present for people. I say prioritizing people. And if they happen to be athletes, then all the better, because their influence is oftentimes greater than that of an average person. And so because of that, when we have a key message and we can manage that to a larger platform through media, hey, it's a great thing. So that's just a little bit about how I think about it. But how about you guys?
I would say, listening to Ellis, he is sort of the model athlete turned business person. And, I wish, every athlete, were as inspiring, certainly as Ellis is, and has it all together. But for me, I guess a lot of times I encounter guys while they're still playing. And for me, I sort of have to become like a bouncer. I mean, it's a little bit training them for life in the real world. Like, okay, you have to put together a resume, and just because you're a leader on the field doesn't mean you're ready to walk into a company. There's something called a marketing department and an HR department. And also just the idea of you have to pay people. I mean, I think a lot of times athletes are used to getting things for free. So, for me, one of my clients was launching his own company, and it's like, you can't just round up people and have them do work for you and expect, for it to be free. I was afraid, maybe they would sue him. And so trying to help them understand, look, this is what like typical corporate America is like, and this is how things work. And you may have gotten things for free, but that's not the way you want to go about your business, once you transition, and there are certain protocols. And so, I try to teach them those tangible things and also the intangibles. I tell them, you're only going to be happy and successful until you have 0% toxicity in your life. So I call it addition by subtraction. There's a lot of people that were around while they were playing, good and bad, may not transition well to the next phase, or maybe not, should have been around in the first place, because they're people who they're just used to having in their lives, but they may not be beneficial to, the athlete's ultimate happiness. So it's things like that where I try and teach them, okay, these are the things that you need to know in business, but these are also the things that you need to know in life once sort of the glitz and glamour disappears for you to ultimately be happy.
I mean, I think there are definitely some challenges with working with athletes. I mean, the first and foremost is trying to reach them, right? I think there's a reason that they have people around them. They get a lot of requests. They need somebody to kind of sort through that for them. Um, but there is always a gatekeeper, if not multiple gatekeepers. So that's going to be your first challenge. Um, if you can get through that, then I think, and you can talk to, if you could have a good conversation with an agent, or with whoever sort of manages them, then I think it's really trying to understand um, their level of interest in what they're trying to get out of it. There are definitely some that are looking to kind of check a box, and say, kind of, I did this part, I did my community stuff. And then there's others that are definitely fully entrenched and want this to be a big part of their life, um, and really feel the need to give back. And so I think as an organization, you have to line yourselves up with the ones that are going to best fit what you need. So for us, I would rather work with fewer athletes and have deeper relationships with them, because I think ultimately we both will get the most out of that. But that means sometimes that those conversations are short, because the demand might be too high of them. But I think the other challenge is, like when you were saying, if they're still playing, the second big challenge becomes trying to coordinate their schedules. They have tremendous demands while they're playing, and so you have to be incredibly flexible and willing to work around a lot of those things in order to identify how they can really integrate with your organization. So those are a couple of challenges that come to mind.
Yeah, and just just real quickly, in I think one of the not difficult things that I don't think is difficult is to be expected, but for the most part, athletes, especially the ones that are still playing, they are very young. And a lot of
Yeah.
I guess all of us, we're older, so we have different priorities in life. But I remember, being a 20-something-year-old athlete, and certain things just were not my priority.
Yeah.
Because I was not a parent and I was not a husband, and I just wanted to have fun and enjoy my life. And but you get thrust into a leadership role, you get thrust into a lot of responsibility, when you're 21, 22 years old, which most people at that age just aren't equipped to handle the amount of responsibility that on a lot of those young men. And you just you don't know what you don't know. So a lot of times, I think young athletes, again, I think especially people who come from tougher backgrounds or poor backgrounds, or they come from some place of struggle. They want to help people. They want to support people. They want to be an asset to their community, but they're still really, really young, and they don't know how. And you don't know how to do most things. Like I had never had a bank account in my life before I got drafted. Like I never had a bank account. Didn't even know what it was. and I was about to graduate from college. So the thing that I think that you can lean on with a lot of these guys is they want to help. They want to be an asset to their community. They have the desire to do so. What they're depending on is like me with people like Darrin, who I've worked with, and people like Michelle, who I've worked with, is people who have the expertise to help them do it the right way, and help them make the decisions that they have absolutely no, like they have absolutely no clue. So they need good people, good organizations that are going to help show them the way. And again, you can use and leverage that influence that they have to help drive the initiative, but bring that player along with you and educate that player along with you. Because in the long run, when that player's done out of the league, but they still have a brand that's very, very valuable. But now they'll be able to better work with you because they understand what the mission is. They understand what the goal is, and they'll have an idea on what it actually takes to get it done.
And just to quickly build on what you said, Ellis, I find that a lot of the athletes I encounter have such big hearts and they really want to make an impact. And the first thing that they think of, or they think the only option, is that they have to launch their own foundation. But a foundation is really a full-time job, and you need employees, and there's certain regulations that you have to follow, and they don't realize that a lot of those parameters come with launching your own foundation. It really is like a second company basically for them. And so a lot of times I'll encourage them, let's start with an event, or let's see how you can get involved, so that way they can do the giving they want to do, but not get dragged down by having an entire foundation that they didn't exactly realize that they were committing to.
Yeah.
And then, something that you said, Christy, as well, I find that the guys that I've worked with, they're used to just kind of texting all the time and at different hours. And I, work to try and help them to understand, okay, when you're in the business world, people tend to work Monday through Friday. Like, do not call them at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night. They're not available. Don't text them on a Saturday night and expect an immediate response. I mean, these are things I just realized, I experienced them first. I'm like, no, this is not going to work. So I try to help them too for when they're interacting with other people. Most athletes that I start working with do not have email accounts until we start working together and they start transitioning to the business world. They don't even know that you're supposed to communicate on email. And even when we're working with sponsors, I'm like, no, you don't want to text them. Like, let's keep it business oriented. But no one had ever, really talked to them about those kinds of things.
Yeah. Both of those are really good points. And I agree with Ellis on the, you don't really think about the age. Right. I mean, this is like, your younger brother at 21, is he really ready for the kind of responsibility that, we're asking some of these athletes to be doing? So I think it's a really good point. And I do think sometimes they want to help, but they don't know how. And if
we lose Christy?
I think we did.
Right.
Well, and Ellis, to build upon this, I mean, you've hit a nerve, and you had the distinction of playing with or for Coach Dungy, right, where this was part of the fabric of how it is that he taught his players that you have a responsibility beyond the game. Gentlemen, right, this is your profession. This is not your life. And what you do off the field is equally as important. And Christy, while you seized up there, I was just bringing back to Ellis, an opportunity to speak to the responsibility of coaches. It's one thing for all of us to come together as advocates or champions, right, practitioners in the sports philanthropy spaces, but internally, I think there's a responsibility on the part of coaches and the ecosystem around players to help to build a framework like Coach Dungy did, and this was decades ago. But can you just speak to that just for a second, Ellis? I think it's important for people to understand maybe what it is that you learned and how it is that you got better as a result of that.
I mean, the organization that the athlete is a part of, gets drafted to, whether it's NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, the culture that the leadership within that organization will impact how they see themselves in the community. So in the NFL, you'll have coaches who are just really focused on football. And as long as you're doing your job on the field, as long as you're doing what you need to do as a player for the organization, then they're fine. I was lucky enough to get drafted to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when Tony Dungy was the coach. And with Coach Dungy, uh, being a part of the community, being an asset to the community was a part of the culture. And he made sure that we all went out in the community and volunteered at hospitals or volunteered to feed the homeless or whatever we were doing. And it permeated through the entire team. So a lot of the guys that were there for 4, 5, 6 years under Coach Dungy, yeah, they did have their own foundations. And yeah, they were doing a lot in the community, and they were building schools and work done, giving away houses, and Derek Brooks Charities was born, and he's built schools and done all types of great work in the city of Tampa. But the culture that we were bought into in Tampa, again, it was never just about football, and it was always Coach Dungy trying to make sure that you were a better human being than you were a football player. So the organizations and the culture that they set, because again, most of these guys are so young, right? I'm coming into the NFL as a 21-year-old. I was raised in a single family home. I went to college. Luckily, I had a great college coach, Jackie Sherrill, who was a good mentor and did the best he could to keep me on the straight and narrow. I was a 21-year-old kid coming into Tampa into a locker room with a coach that was a Hall of Fame level coach with a bunch of Hall of Fame level players. The culture in that locker room was going to impact me, whether it was good or bad, because I was impressionable, and these were people that I looked up to. I was lucky that I got drafted into a great situation where the men in that locker room were not just great football players, but by and large, they were good men, and that impacted my life even till this day.
That's great.
Yeah, that's great.
And Christy, I know we lost you for a second. Was there anything
Sorry.
else you wanted to say?
I don't know where I got cut off, but we can move on.
Okay.
Not a problem.
Well, Christy, when you were talking about the challenges of working with athletes, one thing you mentioned was the challenge of actually reaching the athlete. And so that connects to one of the questions that we have from our viewers. So that question is, without a personal connection to an athlete, how can you reach out to those that have similar interests to your organization's mission? Are there any tips that you have on or advice on DMing via Instagram to get noticed or start a conversation with athletes? And I'll leave that open to any of you to answer.
I mean, I think you should be open to trying to reach people around them. I would love to hear Whitney actually answer this because I'm sure she gets a lot of requests coming her way. But I think a personal connection is where you want to get. Now, sometimes that's an agent, but sometimes that could be even like a family member or a coach, a former coach. So I wish I could say it fell into an easy like this is working with an athlete 101, but unfortunately, like it literally varies. And we've also had luck with literally cold calling some agents too, and just being like, this is what we do, and this is why we think this person might be a good fit. And even that has worked. So I think you have to be flexible and open to really committing to it. But I would love to hear Whitney's take on this and sort of what helps open the doors for some of her athletes.
I would say athletes definitely read their Instagram DMs. That's one way to reach them. The thing is that they get a lot of them, so the ones that stick out provide value. So, for example, if you're a graphic designer or you can create videos and you're willing to maybe offer your services for free at first or an inexpensive price, maybe that's something that would catch their attention. I mean, for me, caring has always been the best strategy. So like I said, I've never asked the athletes I work with for anything. I just try and bring value to their lives. And so when I bring them an opportunity, they usually know it's in their best interest. So I think, knowing the people around them who vet opportunities and who they look to and who they trust definitely goes a long way. And then ultimately it's word of mouth. I had last year two clients on the Jets, and they told me they ended up, without me knowing, presented to the entire Jets locker room on sort of the branding and marketing work that I had done for them. And that was something, of course, I never even asked them to do and had no idea they were even doing it. So, if you work with one particular athlete who is well respected and people look up to, things tend to spread via word of mouth from there. It really is a brotherhood. And I think especially for the people close to them, encouraging them for what's best for them. I always say, even if you're the fourth string punter on a team, people in the community see you as a celebrity. And so you have this really short amount of time when you're in the spotlight to make every connection and create every opportunity that you want to leverage into life after sports. And, as busy as athletes are, there's definitely quite a bit of downtime that people may not realize. And it's partnering with people who realize the importance of maximizing that downtime. So you could go home and take a nap or play video games, but it's also a really great time to go out and do something in the community, work on a charity event, or figure out, an internship you might be able to do. One of my clients had, while he was playing on the Bucks, he had an internship at a radio station, which helped leverage future broadcasting opportunities. So I also think it's finding guys who want to make the most of their experience, because you need to have sort of matching mentalities to be able to create something great.
I think of it as a series of small yeses, right? Hey, do you want to come and do this big thing? Even if it's perfectly matched with their background, if it's well researched, it's sometimes hard. But hey, do you want to do this one thing? Can you make a phone call to a child in a hospital? Can you do something simple that will make a positive difference, and then get to know me and the heart behind why it is that I do what I do? And that served me well over the years. And then Whitney hit it with it really does, the word of mouth around, hey, she is trustworthy, right? Because she's earned that trust, and that ultimately will lead to more. So you've got to commit to this industry, right? If you one and done is not ideal, right? You need to understand and commit to sports philanthropy. And if that's something that's important to you, then you can find a way to get to athletes if that's a passion of yours. But find a way to get small yeses.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it on the head, Darrin. Just being able to get small yeses, I would definitely say, yeah. Sending guys direct messages, just kind of briefly explaining what you do, why you do it, how they could help, and kind of being brief and specific about what you want to get done. I think that could be a good strategy. And again, not being overwhelming, not having this big thing that you want to do. Hey, do this thing, make this call. Can you jump on this Zoom? Or
Exactly.
try to create ways for them to get involved that's not cumbersome. One of the things about our organization is athletes that we've gotten to be involved with our programs. We get them to come on and just kind of be ambassadors for the subject with our classes. Them being able to do it via Zoom was incredibly convenient because they could just click a link and be in a classroom with 30, 40 children instead of having to actually go to a school,
Yes.
and go through the background check and go through all these different hoops that they would have to go through. And again, in one day, you can get an athlete to visit, 4 or 5 classes for 10 minutes, as opposed to just going to one school and then he probably never see those kids again. With Zoom and the way we were doing it, we made it easy for the athletes, and we made it easy for athletes to continue to be involved. So I'll say, making things convenient, especially for younger athletes. Again, they're young. They definitely have a life. Football is a huge part of their life, but they have a life outside of football, and they're young and they want to have fun. They want to travel. They want to go places and enjoy what it means to be in the NFL or be in the NBA. Again, it's an incredible privilege, but it's probably for the guys that are still doing it, one of the greatest times of their lives, and they want to enjoy it. So make what you want them to do, make it something that they can engage in, and it's not something that's cumbersome or too difficult. Because again, you're dealing with young athletes with a lot on their plate and managing a lot, so they don't want to add something extra. But again, just reach out and reach out to guys that you see on Instagram or Facebook, and all of them probably won't hit you back, but all you need is a couple of guys that are interested in what you do, and I think you could definitely do that.
And I think to Ellis's point, you can't be upset or disappointed if you don't get a response back. I mean, you would be amazed by how many requests athletes get on a daily and weekly basis of, from all different avenues of people who want them or to speak at a charity event. And literally, if they said yes to all of them, they would be able to do nothing in their own lives. I mean, there's so many requests that they get inundated with that like a person in the real world could never even begin to imagine. So I think making sure that you can present it as a win for them, where is the value in it for them and what they're going to be able to get out of it, whether it's, speaking experience or meeting people or whatever that might be. And I think, you also don't want to talk about anything regarding them having to donate money. I mean, if there's one thing that athletes get hit up about, it's about people wanting to be around them for their money or their celebrity status, and they can sniff that out pretty quickly. And so if you're reaching out to them and it's about giving money or investing or whatever it might be, they're probably going to shut you down right away. So definitely try to steer clear of any discussions relating to money in the initial conversations.
Really great advice all around. So a little bit earlier, we talked about, the differences between working with current and retired athletes. So can you all go into that in a little more depth in terms of how your approach differs when you're working with a current versus a retired athlete and or a collegiate athlete versus a professional athlete?
Yeah, yeah. Again, like I think, like I said earlier, I mean, the current guys are, of course, most of the time much younger, and they have different priorities. Now, occasionally you get young guys who have old souls, and they want, they
Yeah.
may be on your level or be thinking the way you're thinking about community or whatever your organization does or whatever your company wants to do. They may be thinking on that level. Uh, but more than likely, again, the younger guys just aren't thinking that way because most of us weren't at that age. With retired guys, again, once guys they get older, they start to have families, they start to have children, they start to look at the world differently. So they'll be more open to that type of engagement because again, their priorities have changed. It's not just about their good time and them enjoying being young and being in the NFL and all that comes with that. It's about family and people and community, especially if they have a place where they've trying to kind of put down roots. If they had a career in a certain city or a certain place, or they move back home, once they start to put down roots, then they're more interested in what happens around their community. They're more aware of the things that happen. So I'll say this: the current versus the retired guys. Again, the priorities are just going to be different. The level of engagement is just going to be different. And you may get a young guy. A lot of these young guys these days, again, they've been really thoughtful and really into helping move social justice forward. Like a lot of guys in their 20s who are just light years beyond where me and a lot of guys my age, a lot of guys that played were when I played. They're just a lot more engaged. But still, there's going to be a difference there in priorities from being a young man to being a little bit more seasoned man and being out of the league and looking for what's next.
So how do you determine the right fit for a partnership?
Yeah, so Michelle, just quickly want to touch on your prior question as
Go ahead,
well. For
Whitney.
me, it's actually, a little bit of a challenge because there's certain glamour, glitz, and opportunities that come along with being a pro. And, the athletes that I've worked with, they've built up to this their entire lives, and then all of a sudden it disappears and you're just a regular person. So it's really kind of helping them recalibrate and understand what normal life is like once all the, shininess around the NFL disappears. And that is a hard transition. I don't think people talk enough about sort of mentally what that can do to people, and just making sure that they have the right pieces and people in their lives. And I think they're so used to routine, helping them get a new routine really quickly so they have a purpose and place to go, and sort of can report the same way they would report to a team has been really helpful. And then to just quickly touch on your second question, for me, people have to think I hung the moon and vice versa. It has to feel like how you would treat a family member, and your missions have to be aligned. And for me, if it's someone personally who wants to take advantage or doesn't necessarily want to respect boundaries, that's not the right fit for me. I want someone who does things the right way, and I have no problem saying no to an athlete who isn't on the same page with, how I see the world and vice versa.
Anyone else want to talk about determining the right fit?
I think I think there has to be interest. There has to be interest in your mission for us. I think it's I can give any athlete speaking points or talking points, but people know when there's true investment and interest in what we're doing. And to me, the authenticity that comes along with that is critical. And so I think for me, that's the biggest thing. I mean, for me, the biggest fit is making sure that this person is like a good human being, and that they care about what we care about.
I look for guys in particular that are socially aware, right? That have a self-awareness beyond that of some other men, right? That they can read a talking point, they can embrace it, they can carry it forward with a little gravitas, and I think Ellis is a great example of that, right? He's just coming at it with a perspective of love and hope, but he has this great platform. He's no longer playing, but where he's at, he's got a whole lot of influence. And so I love working with alumni. I love working with active players. It just all makes sense. Later tonight, I'll be on the phone with a Houston Texans player helping to shape his own thoughts and life around who he is as a man. And that's a little bit different. It's not targeting, hey, how do we take that influence and take it out? It's just, who are you? And I've heard Whitney talk a lot tonight about meeting guys where they're at and just being, aware of their situation. So those are just a few things that I think about.
All right. So we have just a couple minutes left. So to wrap it up, if you each would just tell us what you would say is the secret to successful athlete partnerships. And Whitney, we'll start with you.
I would just say quickly, with athlete partnerships and in any business, it's trusting your gut. When I started my business, everyone had advice for me about how I should go about things. Of course, most of the time I never asked for it, but everyone has their 2 cents, and it's easy to get steered off course by, listening to people that you trust or think might be doing it the right way, but it's not what your inner voice is telling you. And I think, in the beginning, a lot of people in the marketing and advertising world give athletes, scopes, and they have to sign retainers. And I didn't think that was right if I knew I necessarily couldn't deliver, or for someone I'm meeting the first time who didn't trust me. So we started out by just doing a percentage of the commission of any deals that I brought in. So that way they knew I wasn't getting on any money until they got paid. And everyone was strictly against that, but that's what really worked for me in the beginning. So I can't stress enough how important it is to trust your gut and kind of follow your inner voice.
Ellis?
Yeah, I mean, I think just being genuine. Again, a lot of living in the world of an athlete, especially if you're somebody who you went to college, played in the pros. It's a totally different world. It's a totally different environment, and working with those guys in your world, there's going to have to be an adjustment. It's going to have to marry together well. But guys want people around that are genuine and that they can trust. Knowing that, again, these guys, for the most part, have been athletes. And all of us went to college. All of us had to, qualify to go to college, had to make sure we can maintain our grades to be there in college. So these aren't dumb guys. These are just guys who haven't had the experience of living, surviving, and thriving in the business world, whether that's for-profit businesses or nonprofits. They just haven't had the experience like most people haven't. So just making sure you're genuine. Don't make guys feel like you're doing too much, or they have to try to figure out and understand where you're coming from. Because again, they're being bombarded all the time with opportunities and people, and there's always sharks in the water. There's always people around who know that you don't know, and know that you don't understand. And they're sharks, and they're trying to take advantage. And guys have their guards up because they know those people are out there. So just being genuine, making sure you find some type of common ground on whatever your issue is. Again, with Darrin, we're working with Darrin. I'm a person of faith, he's a person to face. I got an opportunity to go to Israel with 40 other people, NFL players and personnel, because of my relationship with Darrin. But I trust Darrin, so that's why I went. I wouldn't go halfway across the world with somebody I didn't know or trust and wasn't sure of what they were putting me into. But when Darrin called me about going to Israel and spending 10 days in Israel with Darrin and a bunch of guys, that some of them I knew, some of them I'd never met before, I trusted Darrin, so I went. So I had a relationship with Darrin, some time to get to know him and what he was about. So I went. So again, being genuine, reaching out, not being a person that's trying to take advantage or find an angle or find a way to use a person. Just be genuine, because most of the guys, again, they genuinely want to be an asset. They genuinely want to help. Is your job to make sure you create a framework where that can happen, where it's beneficial for them and it's beneficial for you. But once you develop that trust with the person and they believe in what you're doing, I think you'll get, it'll be a great partnership and you'll get the best out of it.
And Christy?
I know we're running short on time, so I'll just say I think the key for us is mutual respect. So that we respect where they're coming from and some of the challenges that they have, and that they respect that, when they commit to us to do something, that is something that, they feel like they can follow through with. So I think over time, we've just been able to build that mutual respect. And also, we also know that we're all human beings and that, things happen. And so I think being understanding is another important asset.
Wonderful. And Darrin, if you'll close it out.
Oh, I can be so quick. The mantra that I live by: champions aren't champions because they do extraordinary things. They're champions because they do the ordinary things better than anyone else. And guys know they can count on me to take care of some of those ordinary details, to find a way to advocate on their behalf, and then vice versa over time. It's amazing. They begin to model those things in their own life and how it is that they show up on time, stay committed to the cause long after the mood that they made the decision to come to that particular thing in. And it pays dividends because they get the mutual benefit from helping a charity, and then the charity is able to benefit. So I love philanthropy. Right? The Phil in philanthropy, the root word is love. The anthropy is human, right? The love of humans, right? This ability to come together for philanthropic purposes to make a positive difference in people's lives. It's a great way to make a living. You throw in a little sports and you can really make a big difference. So back at you, Michelle.
Hey, and Michelle, just one last thing. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, what we're talking about. I actually got a chance to do with Michelle and Alicia at Champions for Philanthropy. Again, Michelle, I've worked with you. You guys have worked with me to help me grow my organization. I've been to events that you guys have invited me to. Flew up to New York to come out for a gaming event. But I did those things with you guys. We did a golf tournament in North Carolina, right? But I trusted you guys, and I know that you guys are genuine. And I didn't know you guys, right? I had I'd never met you before, but I talked to you guys. We had a conversation. I could tell that you guys were genuine, and we worked together. So again, what we're talking about with athlete partnerships, we've actually been able to do that. So again, I would have been remiss if I didn't get a chance to mention just real world how many of you guys have worked together to make an impact, which has been awesome.
Oh, thank you so much for that. So, Ellis, Darrin, Whitney, Christy, this has been an amazing conversation. I want to thank you all for your time. Thank you to Roy, Kessel, and the entire Sports Philanthropy Network team for putting this together. And thanks to all of the viewers for joining us. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Michelle. Yes, thank you for moderating.
You're a rock star.
No problem. Thanks.
Bye-bye.